Good morning, Godly Play students. Well, today we're having the next chapter in our examination of John Wesley and the Methodist Church. And today I get to talk about one of my favorite things about the Methodist Church because it involves horses. I always liked horses. When I was very small, I think I was smaller than any of you are now. I was probably about 4. I was at home, and my mother was at work, and my father was supposed to be keeping an eye on me, but he had gone downstairs to work in his workshop. And I had just been given a beautiful plastic horse that I thought was the best toy in the world. It's a little bigger than this one. But I was taking my horse, and we were riding along the table in the kitchen. Well, I got bored with that, and I thought my horse should have something more interesting to be riding across. And I couldn't think of what I could do to make the kitchen table more interesting. And then I thought about all of the different things we had in the cabinets. So I went to the cabinets. I think I had to stand on some books to reach some of them. But I got out everything I could find that poured. I got out flour and sugar and baking soda and baking powder and cake mix and tapioca and rice and cereal and dried peas and dried beans and Bisquick and just everything I could find. And I poured everything out on the table into big mounds. And then I would take my horsey and I would go up and down the mountains, and then I would pretend my horse was galloping down. And I was very amused by this for quite some time, until my father came up from the basement. And he told me that that was a very bad thing to do, and he had to clean it up. And he also had to go to the grocery store and replace the flour and the sugar and the Bisquick and the cereal and the dried beans and the dried peas and everything before my mother got home. I think I would have gotten in more trouble, but he didn't want her to know about that little episode. He probably should have been watching me a little more closely. But one of the things that I like about horses is they remind me about Methodist circuit riders. Isn't that an interesting sounding term? Circuit riders. What is a circuit rider? Well, when the Methodist Church was first getting started in the United States, back before it was even a country, there were Methodist pastors who came, and they would be assigned to a circuit. They would be told to take their horse and to go out and ride through an area of the frontier, places that were very, very, very desolate sometimes. And they'd go from little town to little town. They'd go from farm to farm, and they'd preach the gospel. They didn't have much with them. They'd have to take fishing lines so they could get food for themselves if they needed to. They might have to hunt. They would stop at farms and hope maybe the family there would give them a place to stay for the night and feed them. And in return, they would give them a sermon. And in those days, you could ride an entire day just between 2 different farms, and it might take you days and even longer to go from town to town. It was very lonely sometimes. And it was a hard life because they were exposed to terrible weather, and there were wild animals, and sometimes it was hard to find anything to eat. Sometimes they'd go someplace where people weren't very friendly, and they might even try to hurt them. So they were very, very brave people. The other thing that they did is they would have different sections where they would be working that were called circuits, which is where we got the term circuit rider. And those were the geographical areas that they would be working in. And it would sometimes take them as long as 6 weeks to get through the entire circuit. And then they would start again and go to the same town and the same farms, unless perhaps they hadn't been well received in one of those places. And they would change every 2 years, so that if you had been riding on one circuit for a while, then you would be sent to a different circuit. Some people said that this was so that you could use the same sermons, since there would be different people listening to them. One of the most famous circuit riders was a man named Francis Asbury. He was one of the first two bishops of the Methodist Church in the United States, and he covered hundreds of thousands of miles in his career. He lived to be 70 years old. And when I was small, when I was in my hometown, we had a retreat called Asbury Woods, which was named after him. So by the time that the middle of the 19th century came about, by about the 1840s, there were over 1 million Methodists in the United States, in this very young country. And it was all because of the circuit riders. I think I'm going to bring these horses to our classroom so that when we all get together, if you want to, we could work with them. We could pretend that they had circuit riders on them, maybe draw some pictures, maybe make some land that they could travel through, but not with anything like rice or sugar or flour or anything like that. All right, well, bye-bye, and I hope to see you soon.